Well, good morning to those of you coming in on the stream. I am waiting for. Oh, whoops. All right. Give me a second here. Ah, maybe that's it. Is the trusty Joe? No, this is not supposed to be on. Sorry, everybody. This isn't supposed to be on. This is supposed to be Breaking Health Barriers with me, Dr. Jack Stockwell, this Wednesday morning. And I can't broadcast over top of him. So I'm sorry. We'll get this worked out at K Talk one of these days, I think. Just see if Paul can stop that. All right. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead with the streamers. Uh, you're listening to Breaking Health Barriers this morning. Dr. Jack Stockwell. That's me at ForbiddonDoctor.com. Several different subjects I want to cover. Not the least of which is how stupid do they think we are? The stuff that is constantly coming our way. Just the constant programming. Now, if you thought that the mRNA vaccine saga couldn't get any wilder, Japan just dropped a bombshell that's shaking the narrative to its core. A group of 350 Japanese volunteers, led by the United Citizens for Stopping mRNA Vaccines, has unleashed a staggering 21 million Japanese volume is quite low on the stream. Man, it's just one thing after another, isn't it? Paul? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that made that very clear. The health show will still be. All right, now tell me how the stream sounds too, would you? Dang. All right, Paul, thanks. All right. All right, swap. Back to K Talk. All right, it looks like some miscommunication, but we should be okay now. You're listening to K Talk on one hand and the stream on the other, but it looks like the volume's really low. So, you know, there was an entire year that I went down to the Linden studio. And that takes me an extra hour. It takes a half an hour to get down there and more than half an hour to get back because of the morning traffic. And I just didn't have the time to do that. So I decided I'd start doing a broadcast from my home. And I am at the mercy of whoever did the last live broadcast at K Talk. And if they leave all the volume settings low, and I don't know how many times we have to tell them, please don't do that. Please leave a good, open, loud broadcast. They don't do it. Now, short of sounding like a whining little baby, it's just, it just never ceases to end. And maybe they can get the studio back up here again. That would be the thing to do. Get it back up in Salt Lake. Then we wouldn't have to worry about these kinds of problems. I can see the broadcast signal is low. People are already telling me that the system is low or the volume is low. I'm sorry, I can't do a whole lot more other than that. But I had a lot of good stuff I wanted to share with you, and I'm not going to yell to get it through, but I want to start all over again because of this 21 million vaccination record that has been examined in Japan. There are these 350 Japanese volunteers led by the United Citizens for Stopping mRNA Vaccines in Japan. And they obtained a Freedom of Information Act request. They have, the same thing in Japan they have here. This isn't some small fry data set, mind you. This is a colossal trove of vaccination dates, lot numbers, and most chillingly, the deaths associated with it. And what does it reveal? Well, it's not, the results are not the safe and effective mantra that you get all the time. By analyzing over 21 million records, Professor Murakami at the Tokyo Science University uncovered a disturbing peak in deaths 90 to 120 days after the mRNA vaccination, with higher doses showing earlier death peaks. People who got more jabs died sooner, suggesting a cumulative toxicity that builds up with each shot. Murakami estimates that 600,000 to 610,000 Japanese may have died post-vaccination, which is the figure that aligns with, during that same period that they were gathering this data, of the excess deaths that occurred in Japan above the normal death rate. Well, here's the kicker, and it's the same thing in this country. When you see some admission come out of either the FDA or the CDC that ends up back on page 38B, why isn't this stuff plastered across the headlines, across all the press, across the whole planet? Murakami suggested that they're happening 3 to 4 months later, slipping under the radar of official reports because doctors don't see them as the cause of death if it didn't happen within just a few days of the vaccination. And as they studied these 21 million records, they found out that the excess number of deaths didn't occur in the first week or two. They occurred between 3 and 4 months after, which makes sense because it takes that long for the inflammatory processes and all of the clots and all the blockages to start showing up in the body that start shutting down organs, not the least of which would be the heart. The government's not connecting the dots, and it's no surprise why. These delayed deaths don't fit the narrative that this stuff is safe and effective. In fact, it points to a crisis that's been swept under the rug, not just in Japan, but here as well. But the good news is this. While Big Pharma is still pushing forward on its next big project, the self-replicating mRNA vaccine, the Replicon, the Japanese public isn't buying it. Big Pharma is coming out with a version of the mRNA vaccine that replicates itself, that it doesn't stop, it just keeps going. Now, we know the original one kept producing spike protein. This one keeps producing the so-called vaccine that keeps producing the spike protein. So, out of 4.2 million doses that were rolled out in Japan last October, only 10,000 people got the injection. That's less than 0.25%. Now let that sink in. The Japanese people, pretty much informed to the same level that we are here in this country, the same freedom of the press, though it's beginning to be limited somewhat here in this country, as well as our freedom of speech is disappearing. But in Japan, they're still alive and well. And so when they roll out 4.2 million doses of the latest version of the vaccine, only 10,000 people took it. They're not just sitting quietly. Over 100,000 signatures of Japanese citizens has been delivered to Japan's Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare demanding a halt to these vaccines. So I know here in America, it's hardly the case that anybody doesn't know at least somebody who died from the vaccine. As I've told my patients many times, I never lost one patient to COVID. But I think the number is either 8 or 9 now that have passed because of the vaccine. How do we know it's the vaccine? Because these are the ones who died shortly after getting the injection. And by shortly, I mean within a week or two. What about the ones, according to the Japanese study, that suddenly die 3 and 4 months after their injection of a heart attack, pancreatic cancer, some kind of a stroke or a clot, where there's no family history of these things at all? They just suddenly showed up, they died. So why the resistance? Well, this Replicon vaccine as the next generation solution is just raising alarms everywhere. According to the press conference, the pharmaceutical company behind it, Meiji Seika Pharma, has admitted to higher rates of adverse effects and deaths compared to the original Pfizer and Moderna jabs. And if the first round of mRNA shots was bad, this self-replicating version sounds like a sci-fi horror show. So that's why the Japanese citizens are saying, hey, thanks, but no thanks. And it isn't just a Japanese battle, it's a global wake-up call. The United Citizens Group, with 70,000 supporters and 3,000 volunteers, is pushing for international collaboration to stop these mRNA vaccines, including a planned influenza shot set for the fall of this year. And so the group's database, though currently Japanese only, is being prepped for English translation, and they're inviting researchers worldwide to join in. But it's not all smooth sailing, because the group is facing tremendous legal heat. The pharmaceutical company that's making this Replicon slapped this lawsuit on Congressman Kazuhiro Haraguchi and others for speaking out against the Replicon vaccine. Haraguchi himself claims he developed lymphoma post-vaccination with spike proteins found in his lymph cells. Coincidence? So the 21 million record bombshell isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's lives and families and a healthcare system that has failed to ask the right questions. The peak in deaths at 90 to 120 days, the staggering estimate of 600,000 plus deaths, and the public's rejection of the Replicon jab just screams one thing. People are waking up, and Japan's data, painstakingly gathered by volunteers, is a clarion call to rethink this mRNA experimentation stuff before more lives are lost. Now, the database is online. You can go look at it yourself. And they're currently working on the English translation. United Citizens for Stopping mRNA Vaccines is what you would search. Now, the fight isn't over, folks. We just want to keep pushing for the truth, because if we don't, who is going to when the next pandemic shows up? Now, back here in this country, the CDC has found that nearly 1 in 3 U.S. teens are pre-diabetic. 1 in 3 U.S. teens. Pre-diabetic. Now, I just want to mention, before I get into this CDC report, and yeah, I know you have a hard time believing a lot of what CDC says, but when they come up with statistics like this, it's certainly worth paying attention to what they're saying, especially when you figure out what's causing it. Now, I just want to mention the half-off special is still going on. Sorry. The half-off special is still going on at the clinic. I'm cutting my initial fee by 50% during the month of July for those who listen to these broadcasts. I said mostly K-Talk, but for the stream as well. The numbers aren't as big, obviously. In fact, I've noticed the numbers for my political show have dropped considerably on the stream. And I was talking to somebody last night who probably knows me as well as anybody does. And they said, you're turning liberal. I said, I'm not turning liberal. I'm just not gung-ho that everything that comes out of the White House is necessarily something I 100% agree with, especially when the truth is not being told anymore in many areas. And oh my gosh, they jumped down my throat when I said that. I wouldn't necessarily call these MAGA people that I was talking to, but I think they're listening to the evening news too much rather than researching the alternative news. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I was kind of expecting the numbers to grow. All right, and then they're always higher during the second hour than the first anyway. All right, now I want to talk about what the CDC is saying here. This is published in Associated AP, the AP Press. You can get this yourself if you want more information about it. But I usually use the example of when I was in school, when I was in grade school, when I was in middle school, when I was in high school. I can't remember any fat kids. I just can't. There was a few that were kind of chubby, but I can't remember any really fat kids. Now I'm back at K-Talk again. Now that commercial's over. Again, I wanted to announce during the month of July. We usually only do this in December. Half off. It's not a 2-for-1. It's even better than that. You can just come in by yourself. Half off of my initial fee for the work that we do in the clinic. As a thank you, just a thank you for the K-Talk audience building what I have. I saw 3 new people yesterday, some from K-Talk, some from other sources. I saw a lady from New Orleans who heard about us and checked us out online and then decided to come. And she's 72 and just having terrible pain from her neck all the way down her spine. She comes to Utah in the winter times to ski. And so she's familiar with Salt Lake. She's familiar with Park City and the ski resorts that Utah has to offer. But due to the fact that she's had several falls, her spine is twisted up pretty bad. Had a great time with her. She stood up, when I was done with her, she stood up straight, had considerable relief in the pain. Her shoulders leveled off, her hips leveled, her spine straightened up. And she walked across the floor with considerably less pain at 72. I just started on a lady yesterday at 86. 86, born and raised here, but a lot of outdoor experiences and a few really good crashes. And again, just completely leaning off to the side, out of vertical, with very serious head, neck, shoulder pain, low back pain, and considerable relief just with the very first correction before she left the office. And then I love showing these people their x-rays. I show them their x-rays before, I show them their x-rays afterwards. Here's why you're feeling better. You see how the head and the neck have come back straight with one another instead of a kink, so that spinal cord's not being kinked anymore. Completely changes the physical presentation of the body and a serious decrease in pain. And usually back pain really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the spine, other than the spine being misaligned. It's the muscles that surround the spine that are in a constant state of spasm. And when that source of spasm is stopped, the pain stops. And depending on how long it's been there, it may take 2 to 3 days, it may take a week or 2, but eventually, very quickly, the pain's eradicated by stopping the cause of the pain. And that's what we're about. You can make an appointment, 801-523-1890. The appointment costs you nothing. We'll talk for a good half hour. You tell me what's going on, I'll tell you what's going on from my end and whether I think I can help you or not. And there are those I can't. There are those whose problems are outside my scope of practice. But if I think I can help you, we'll get started. You're scheduled for me to take care of you. I'll take care of you right away. You call the office, 801-523-1890, 1890, and tell them you'd like to see me, especially with the radio broadcast discount. But we need to do it during the month of July. This week, of course, is full. I think there may be 1 or 2 spots next week if you'd like me to take care of you. But there's no reason why you can't have the same experience these other people are having. There's a 12-year-old young lady, just super rapid growth. I mean, she's already up to 5'8", or 5'8" or 5'9", 12 years old, and just pain all the way up and down her spine. It just so happens that at 2, she fell down a few stairs on a cement stairway. And that's when it started. And very easy to, 12 years old, they're very easy to fix. There's few fixations in the spine. Very easy to fix. And then there is a lady that I said flew in from New Orleans. It's 72, I think. And then a lady I started with yesterday, 86. And it's always the ladies. It's the same thing with a dentist. It's the same thing with a medical office, a chiropractic office, even a physical therapy office. Women far outnumber the men who want to take care of their bodies. Men aren't nearly as concerned with their health until the health is gone as women are. A woman can develop a little tingling in the 4th finger of her left hand, and she's got to check it out. Guys couldn't care less. All right, now I want to get to the other topic that I wanted to get to. The report from the CDC, nearly 1 in 3 teens are pre-diabetic. So a new federal estimate is showing this rise in pre-diabetes. What's pre-diabetes? Well, obviously it precedes diabetes. It's when you start having some serious metabolic balancing issues, elevated blood glucose, and a few other things start showing up. But the problem is it's spreading like wildfire among U.S. children. And in 2023, nearly 1 in 3 children in an age group of 12 to 17 had prediabetes. And according to a recently released data from the CDC, that is far higher than the previous estimate that was 1 in 5 kids a few years earlier. So there's no question that prediabetes in the U.S. youth is a serious concern. The condition puts at risk developing type 2 diabetes, plus heart disease, stroke, metabolic problems. So the scientists who study and treat diabetes noted that the CDC officials released only a 600-word summary of their new findings. Not the raw data, nor a peer-reviewed published paper describing how they arrived at that figure. The agency also changed the methodology used to calculate the higher estimate without a detailed explanation, which of course underscores the questions about the accuracy of information being released by America's top health agency following these widespread staff cuts in recent months. Christopher Gardner, who's an expert at diabetes and nutrition at Stanford, said, "For any of the national health organizations now being decimated by firings and layoffs, I'm going to be skeptical of data updates until there is transparency and clarity on the source of the data and the analysis." In other words, Associated Press is running cover for the Democratic bloat that ended up getting into these agencies. But the new analysis used the latest science and technologies, and the most updated methodology of science is continually evolving, the spokesperson from the CDC, Melissa Dibble, said. She said these new data highlight the magnitude of prediabetes among adolescents and serve as a critical wake-up call for the nation. Pre-diabetes, of course, is a precursor to diabetes. It's just a disease in which sugar builds up in the blood, and then the insulin has a hard, becomes sensitive to it. The body becomes sensitive to the insulin, and what do you do with the extra sugar that's building up in the blood? What's your body do with it? Just before I went to bed last night, I jumped around on YouTube for a few moments. Because if I am not as sleepy as I think I should be at the time I crawl into bed, you know what I watch? I watch these YouTube videos of winter campers. I mean, winter hikers that are camping out in 6 feet of snow and minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit with just the backpack and perhaps a dog that's gone with them. And as I was jumping around, I saw a couple of other things that caught my attention. And one of them had to do with sugar buildup in the system, and that the polar bear employs. And it was about maybe a 15-minute video on the savagery of polar bears that they claim are the largest carnivores on the planet. I thought the brown bear in Alaska was, but they say the polar bear is. And it shows how they'll dive in the water to catch seals, beluga whales in the summertime, and they grab these animals and pull them up on the shoreline and have their meal. And they talk about how they load these animals up as just gorge and gorge and gorge to build the fat layers in their own bodies to help insulate during the harsh winter months, which of course above the Arctic Circle is about 9 months of the year. Well, anytime we have excess carbohydrates in the bloodstream in the form of sugar, our body's going to do the same thing the polar bears do. They take that sugar and they convert it to fat. Fat is simply nature's way of storing energy. There's more than twice as much energy in a gram of fat than there is a gram of carbohydrate or a gram of protein. And anything that's flowing through the bloodstream in the sense of food energy that the body doesn't require, it stores it. Now, some of you have already had breakfast this morning. Some of you won't eat till lunch. Those of you who had breakfast, if your body doesn't require everything that's going into the bloodstream in your digestive process, the body will convert it to fat because it doesn't know you're going to have lunch. And those of you who won't be eating until lunch, once your lunch is over with, it's the same thing. Your body doesn't know you're going to have dinner. It doesn't know that that's not your last meal, so it serves up any excess energy in the form of fat. Now, what's that got to do with prediabetes? The problem is most of these kids that fall into this category are not eating food. They're eating pasteurized or prepared stuff. They're eating processed stuff. They're eating seed oils that were never intended to be food, or I don't think Mother Nature ever intended them to be food. And so they've got all this stuff that's blocking the normal metabolic processes of the body that backs up the energy in the blood because the body can't access it and utilize it to the degree it otherwise would. And so it stores it as fat. And then because the sugar levels in the blood are there constantly from sugar cereals, and it doesn't have to be a sugar sweetened cereal. All cereals are sugar. Almost all breakfast cereals, just junk food. Any real underlying value that came from some form of grain, probably a GMO of some kind, has been altered by the presence of oxygen, altered in the presence of the various chemicals and additives that are used to make up these flakes or puffs or whatever else that ends up in a cereal box. And the fact that They have to spray these things with synthetic vitamin sprays just so they can say that they're healthy. Should tell you something about the raw materials going into these cereals. But they raise blood sugar. And then some of these kids will have a mid-morning snack. Some of them won't eat till lunch, whatever. But they're not eating a wide choice of foods for their lunch that would be considered covering all the bases. And then usually once school's out and they head home, they have something that's not necessarily a balanced meal between protein, fat, and carbohydrates. It usually ends up being carbohydrates. It keeps the blood sugar level high. They keep getting more and more sensitive to the presence of insulin to where the body doesn't recognize it. The sugar builds up and is converted to fat. And it's constantly taxing the pancreatic system, especially the pancreas. And its ability to produce insulin is affected. Its ability to balance sugar in the system is affected by this. Your endocrine system has a lot to do with balancing sugar in your body. It begins to be somewhat dysfunctional. And so you end up with 1 in 3 kids between the age of 12 and 17 pre-diabetic. How long does pre stay there until they become diabetic? I mean, what's the difference? Well, blood tests and then pancreatic enzymes and the ability to handle glucose testing. They'll get to a point where they're no longer pre-diabetic, they're now diabetic because they probably end up becoming insulin dependent at this point. Pre-diabetic children can be on various drugs, metformin, some of the other drugs associated with prediabetes or diabetes. Some of them are lucky to be able to handle with diet. But the trick about those with diabetes that can handle their disease, handle being a relative term, through diet choices, should tell you that through diet choices, the problem emerged. And through diet choices, the problem can be eliminated. We've had many diabetic patients no longer on their insulin, simply by massive lifestyle change that involved exercise, better sleep, lower stress levels, and very wise food choices. And when they stopped loading their bodies up with sugar, the symptoms of diabetes disappeared, sometimes in as little as just a few weeks. So when you change the way you analyze something, you're going to change the outcome. And so the American Diabetes Association recommends a low-fat diet, when that's exactly the opposite of what you should be doing. Now, this new analysis concludes that about 8.5 million U.S. adolescents, or nearly 33%, have prediabetes. That's up from an estimate of 18% published in 2020. This increase of 28 to nearly 33 is not what you would consider significantly different statistically, even though it reflects an apparent rise. It's concerning that the CDC officials provided such limited information about the new analysis. I would like to believe it doesn't diminish the quality of the CDC data, says Khan, a CDC spokesperson. However, because there's no raw data to look at, none of us can look at it to better understand where these numbers are derived from and what they mean. Dr. Samar Hafida, who's an endocrinologist and representative of the American Diabetes Association, said the new analysis wasn't very transparent. She noted that the CDC update estimate generally squares with what doctors are seeing, which is an increase in youth with obesity and elevated blood sugar levels. She says it could be that maybe the number's slightly inflated, but I would hesitate to dismiss it. Still, what matters is the rates of diabetes and obesity among kids is rising. And the Diabetes Association recommends that children and adolescents should be screened for diabetes type 2 starting at age 10 if they were overweight or have obesity or another risk factor for the disease. They said that this is a call to action. There will likely be a surge in early onset type 2 diabetes that we're not prepared to deal with. You think? You think if you have a growing flood of pre-diabetes, that a lot of them may end up becoming diabetics? Yeah, you bet they will be. So when I consult with parents with children who are in this category, we have to have a massive lifestyle change for that child. And a lot of them go kicking and screaming into that lifestyle change. They're going to be eating eggs and bacon for breakfast. They're not going to have mid-morning snacks. They're going to have a healthy lunch. They're not going to have afternoon snacks, unless it's maybe some fruit and limited fruit. Fruit isn't all it's cracked up to be, as far as health is concerned. And a good sampling of proteins from meat and poultry and fish, especially deep ocean fish. And these meals can be prepared in such a way that the children themselves prepare them for the food they're going to eat. And we've had some great success in families that would employ that methodology. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk about, I think, I might wait till the next hour. I was asked about if I had seen some of the latest research on breastfeeding. And I said no. The reduction in SIDS, the reduction in necrotizing enterocolitis associated with breastfeeding. No, I hadn't seen these numbers, so I went and looked at them. And I want to talk to you about it. It seems odd. It seems odd to me that this would ever be an issue. But then it seems odd to me that diabetes should ever be an issue, because you eat your way into diabetes. The same way I believe you eat your way into cancer, the way you eat your way into central nervous system dysfunction because of things you're eating and things you're not eating. The things you're not eating lead to malnutrition, mineral shortages, organ dysfunction, and the stuff that you're eating that you shouldn't be eating that's not really food, not fit for human consumption, fills the belly, satisfies the hunger, but further leads to malnutrition in the fact that you're not getting what you should be getting, and you're getting all of these chemical substances that Mother Nature never intended for you to eat, and so your body's under a double barrage. Now, when it comes to breastfeeding, even a half healthy mother will still produce milk when she's nursing, if she's prepared herself to produce milk during the pregnancy. And there are ways to do that. There's herbs that trigger that. Even a half healthy mother who may be not as attentive to her food choices during the pregnancy as she might otherwise have been, still will produce something far better than what's coming there in the can. So I think because it's going to take more than 15 minutes to talk about it, I think I will save that to the next hour. But here's, do you remember Ronald Reagan's, 9 words? The scariest 9 words in the English language? His joke about that? Hi, we're here from the government and want to help. Something like that. Now, you've got to hand it to the government for a system that's historically been about as nurturing to our true concerns, political, social, financial. This great maternal instinct that the government has to save us from ourselves. You know, for the you can roll into just about any gas station and pick up a carton of menthol cigarettes. You can get a box or a bag of powdered donuts. You can get a whole host of energy drinks saturated with sugar. You can get a overly processed beef stick as long as your arm. And no one says anything. If you want to guzzle a gallon of soda and along with it, a family-sized bag of pasteurized, processed, cheese-flavored snacks for breakfast, you have that right as an American citizen to do so. You can microwave plastic containers filled with nothing but frosting until they're one molecule away from becoming radioactive. And the FDA won't send a welfare check. Instead, they just pat you on the back and mumble, bon appetit, while rubber stamping another food additive that didn't exist yesterday and still hasn't been tested on one monkey. But you find yourself out there somewhere, maybe a friend supplies you with it, maybe you heard it on some outlaw radio show, some cheap, generic pill that's been around for a long time, or a potion that millions across the planet are swearing it's curing their asthma, curing their allergies, their back pain, their bursitis, their cirrhosis, their cancer, their depression, and yes, even diabetes. Now the government's very concerned, deeply, profoundly worried. In fact, you have to be stopped from taking this pill for your own good. And yet you can go into, as I said, a gas station convenience store and get all that crap without the least bit of attention from the government. But someone comes along and says, try this horse paste, this horse parasite paste. It cured my asthma. Try it out, see if it helps you. You can go to jail for that. So you kind of have to wonder, why is it that the only therapies that are allowed to be considered real medicine are the ones that can cost as much as your car payment and requires a whole battery of scientists to try to explain what it is and how it works? I mean, why is anything simple and cheap automatically suspicious and dangerous? How come the minute an effective or anecdotal message enters into the chat, the misinformation police have to get involved? And why does the government, which seems largely indifferent to public suffering, care so much when we try as parents to protect our own health and the health of our children, but couldn't care less while when you're on your way to some celebration somewhere, you and the family stop to get gas, and every member of the family walks out with a bag of something that's not fit for human consumption, and the government says nothing? You kind of have to wonder about that. Well, of course, I'm being facetious. There's no need to wonder about any of this. The selective concern for our well-being comes down to money and manipulation, pure and simple. They care when it's a chemical that they don't make, sell, or control. If it's something that's out of their hands because they can't patent it, or the patent ran out and somebody has some derivation of it, then they lose all sensibility. They're suddenly brimming with compassion when there's no patent, no billion-dollar marketing campaign, no stock surge that they can ride. They just say, oh, don't take it. Ivermectin, don't take it. Hydroxychloroquine, don't take that stuff. Apple cider vinegar, oh, holy smoke. DMSO, Laetrile, fenbendazole, ozone therapy, colloidal silver, N-acetyl cysteine, hydrogen peroxide, cannabis, borax, baking soda, Lugol solution, methylene blue, melatonin. They're just, oh, those things can be very dangerous. You shouldn't be taking those things. They should be licensed. Well, yeah. So could the fast food. I mean, the alcohol tax, the cigarettes that are regulated with a polite little warning in fine print that hardly anybody bothers reading. Unlike in Europe. Do you know what's on a package of cigarettes that you buy over the counter in Europe? Pictures of dead bodies, cancerous tumors, rotting, diseased lungs, right on the box of cigarettes. And then all of the brightly colored cereal boxes I was talking about, where you put cartoon characters on them, even though the crap inside contains enough sugar to give a polar bear a buzz. So let's focus our collective anxiety on a molecule that might have a few antimicrobial properties. Let's run 17 different campaigns against a compound that's been used to disinfect drinking water and clean hospital rooms for decades. Let's pretend the biggest threat to civilization is some farm animal dewormer that's also routinely used on humans and won the Nobel Prize. Not the fact that half of the grocery store looks like it was designed with the express goal of destroying your mitochondrial energy sources. Whatever we do, don't study any of those things, to be sure. Let's just continue the crazy talk that this simple little plant, this little flower, this little root, this horse worm dewormer paste can do fantastic miracles. We don't want to talk about that because there's no money in it. And now that there's finally somebody inside the bureaucratic system who does want to study all of this stuff and more, even though his own base is starting to turn on him. I mean, this is you do realize, of course, this is exactly what RFK Jr.'s enemies want, his own base to turn on him. You know, there's something patently backwards about all of this, and we're not trusted to assess our own risk when it comes to trying something new that they haven't approved. But we're expected to read the fine print on the documents that we sign, excuse me, file our taxes correctly, ask to see the non-existent package inserts that didn't come with our safe and effective vaccine. I mean, we're just too stupid to decide how to treat our own sore throat. But somehow we're smart enough to sit on a murder trial jury. It's not that people shouldn't be cautious. Of course we should. Science matters, safety matters. But when every non-pharma therapy is painted as a threat and every mass-manufactured, FDA-approved Frankenpill is promoted like it's the second coming of penicillin, it's clear the concern is less about public health and more about keeping the patient pipeline profitable. Remember, there are those folks who brought us thalidomide. They brought us OxyContin. They brought us high fructose corn syrup. And now they're worried that you might eat 2 or 3 apricot kernels looking for B17. And if you were to tell somebody what you were doing in the sense that it actually did something for the benefit of your cancer, the benefit of your body's ability to reject the cancer, you can go to jail. So, you say something like, I'd like to try a single drop of this expensive formula I heard could ease my pain, and I can get it on Amazon for 14. What? Says the government. Are you kidding? There's not a single double-blind, placebo-controlled study to prove that that works. Plus, if you take 30 times the suggested dose and then go juggling knives in traffic, you could die. You say something like, instead, you say something like, I would like to eat 4,000 calories of ultra-processed sludge every day for a decade, and then jab myself in my belly once a week with a needle with something that could end up making my teeth fall out, so I can lose all the weight I gained by violating the laws of Mother Nature. And the government says, ooh, there's a solid plan for you. We approve. Here's a coupon for $10 off your first prescription. Try asking your doctor about the role of vitamin C in collagen formation in your osteopenia bones. And the conversation will quickly turn to an awkward pause, I guarantee it. Bring up ivermectin, and you could end up on 2 or 3 watch lists. Mention vaccine injury, and you might as well start shopping for a domestic terrorist t-shirt. But if you're interested in some new novel injection developed at warp speed with liability waivers baked right into the contract, oh, step right up. Can we give you a partially hydrogenated donut to go with that? And then there's the media. My goodness. All right. We may have to. Now, I'm going to continue with this with the stream. K-Talk's going to go to break here, the top of the hour break, for station ID and the news. But while they're doing it, I will talk to those who are on the stream. You can get on the stream at youtube.com/Dr. Jack Stockwell, I think. Where's that X? Anyway, go to YouTube and search for Breaking Health Barriers. And you can continue on the stream. But then there's the media. Oh, my goodness. The power of the dollar when it comes to the media. The same networks that glamorize every celebrity diet looks down their noses at anybody who mentions a non-approved therapeutic. And they're outraged. Outraged, I tell you, that you might take your own health into your own hands, but they have no interest in knowing why a child's lunchbox might contain more artificial dye than a paintball gun. But maybe, just maybe, we're starting to turn a corner, because there's the government that we've always known, the one that vilifies eggs, promotes seed oils as heart healthy, and tells Americans to load up on frosted mini wheats and be careful that your children get too much chicken. And then there's Bobby Kennedy. As head of Health and Human Services, Kennedy's already doing the unthinkable, cleaning house, exposing everyday toxins that we've been exposed to for decades, and airing out the mildew-ridden basement where pharma's big secrets have gone on festering unchecked. Well, I hear something playing there. I'll put K-Talk on pause there while the news plays. I know I'm being a little bit maybe silly here, but he's opening the door. Bobby Kennedy's opening the door to natural remedies. He's pushing for research into inexpensive, over-the-counter concepts like vitamins and peptides, and treating human beings like they might be more than just long-term revenue streams. Now, is it happening fast for some folks' liking? Probably not, but it's happening undeniably. Because the usual suspects are just getting apoplectic over this. Several major medical groups, the same ones that spent the last few decades playing footsie with the FDA, the CDC, and every prominent pharmaceutical lobbyist, are now suing Kennedy for having the nerve to say something like this. Maybe let's stop recommending experimental gene therapies to babies and pregnant women. And if you have any doubts about how corrupt the system is, it turns out the lead attorney on this case suing Bobby Kennedy Jr. was a vice president of Moderna during the development of the Spikevax COVID vaccine. Yes, it's that in your face. And no wonder they're hell-bent on destroying this lunatic anti-vaxxer now at the head of HHS. And nothing terrifies the cartel more than someone who refuses to play by its own rules. But for those of us who've been called crazy for drinking raw milk, and I had my first big glass of raw milk this morning already, or dangerous for suggesting that food can be just as powerful as a medicine as anything cooked up in the corporate cauldron, it's a wildly positive sign. Now, if you're afraid of feeling hopeful, ask yourself, when was the last time we had a public official who actually openly questioned vaccine safety? A government official that vowed to uncover the root cause of autism epidemic, or casually mentioning the phrase gut microbiome on a national stage. When I heard Bobby Kennedy say that, I about fell over. He mentioned the gut microbiome in a public setting. Your gut microbiome, the bacteria, the viruses, the molds, the parasites, everything that lives in your gut, is the beginning and the end of life. The healthier your gut, the healthier you're going to be. The sicker the gut, the closer you are to death. And he actually mentioned the gut microbiome. And the amount of treacherous work that is going on behind the scenes now to get him out of office. Kennedy may not be the lone savior of Maha that's expected to, march in and destroy the entire broken system with a single stroke of a pen, as Trump is doing with his executive orders. But he is the only one fighting for our health at the level of government power that he holds. And he is up against one hell of an enemy. I mean, for years, the enemy has been telling us to trust the science, the same science that has led to this chronic disease epidemic that's going on, this disastrous COVID vaccine rollout, and the approval every year of hundreds of drugs that turn out to be dangerous and deadly. So, my hat is off to Secretary Kennedy for that very reason. All right, now, I want to make a case that I shouldn't have to be making. I want to make an argument that stands by itself that shouldn't have to be made. I want to list some points and factors in one's own health determination and that of our children that is self-evident. we human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, that's the particular Homo sapiens that we are, Homo sapiens sapiens, are mammals. We're mammals because we possess mammary glands. I have them right here. They're undeveloped because I'm a man. The female of the species has them because they're developed, because of the estrogen that predominates over testosterone that the men have. To develop mammary glands, to develop milk to feed our newborns, whether a kangaroo or a giraffe or a lion or a sheep or a cow or a horse or any other mammal for that matter. There's a couple of weirdo exceptions out there, but for the most part, we have mammary glands to feed our young. The mother's bloodstream is flowing through those mammary glands. Those mammary glands are doing several things, but two major functions. Number one, loading the mammary tissue up with what's in the blood, except for the red blood cells. The main liquid of breast milk, the same cow's milk when it's raw, is what's flowing through the bloodstream except for the red blood cells. Mama's plasma is the main liquid in breast milk. What is mama's plasma doing for her? Transporting the immune system, transporting a very important protein, transporting amino acids, peptides, all kinds of stuff to keep mama alive. That's going straight into her breast milk. That's the main function. The second function is that the breast tissue is producing things endogenous to the breast tissue itself that is very necessary for a baby's developing body. But the fats, the proteins, the carbohydrates in mama's bloodstream is right there in the milk. Now, every year, thousands of preventable infant hospitalizations occur, many due to conditions that breast milk had been given from the day of birth could have prevented. And yet, here we're in a culture that is just steeped in pharmaceutical convenience and at the same time massive institutional amnesia, where breastfeeding remains underpromoted, undersupported, and routinely undercut by hospital practices and federal policy. It's not a matter of lifestyle. Breastfeeding is not a lifestyle choice. It's a matter of biology, it's a matter of immunity, and it's a matter of survival. So in the most comprehensive analysis of its kind to date, 600 papers were reviewed of the most recent peer-reviewed scientific abstracts published between 2000 and 2024 to quantify how often breastfeeding was cited as providing specific health benefits. And the result is a graph that is so lopsided in favor of benefit that there's no room for any skepticism. And any skeptic would look absurd. So the methods, where they were parsing the literature for direct benefits, they reviewed 2 batches of abstracts. And this is by Dr. James Lyons Weiler out of Popular Rationalism. And they took 300 studies from top-tier journals that are published in PubMed, spanning 2000 to 2020, and 300 studies from 2020 to 2024, selected for relevance and citation quality. and an additional 1,240 peer-reviewed papers. Each abstract was tagged with explicitly stated health benefits of breastfeeding, as opposed to what you would not get feeding the baby something other than mama's milk. And the results were a clean, quantitative ranking of benefits by mentioned frequency is the term, across 600 most recent studies. These are the words that showed up the most as definite cited benefits of breastfeeding. And of the 40 distinct health benefits recorded, some outcomes were referenced dozens of times in the 600 abstract sample. These include necrotizing enterocolitis, NEC, and its prevention in infants when fed mama's milk, especially preterm babies, cited in over half of the abstracts. A remarkable consensus. Necrotizing means dying, something that's causing the death of, and then enterocolitis. Well, it's an infection of the small intestine that results in the death of portions of the small intestine. The second thing most noted was visual acuity and retinal development. Cognitive gains and higher IQ scores. Reduced maternal risk of type 2 diabetes during and after pregnancy. Greater maternal self-efficacy and lower postpartum depression. Lower incidence of childhood asthma, obesity, and type 1 diabetes. Reduced hospital admissions and shorter stays for infected infants. Lower antibiotic use, and directly reducing what's known as AMR, antimicrobial resistance. Decreased healthcare costs across private and public payers. Improved infant sleep regulation and circadian rhythm stability. Delayed return of maternal fertility and lactational amenorrhea. In other words, mama stayed infertile for a longer period of time during breastfeeding, and cessation of her periods while she was breastfeeding. And then a reduced risk of breast and ovarian cancers. So while the high frequency mentions dominate the top tier, many of the benefits appeared less often but with consistent support. For example, the reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, inflammatory bowel disease, and autoimmune conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis were less commonly mentioned in abstracts among breastfeeding women. So there's a steep concentration for mentions of NEC, of necrotizing enterocolitis. A very strong development for good visual development in the newborn, and cognitive functions where their brain seems to come online faster than babies that aren't being breastfed. And breastfeeding is far more than just a feeding method. It's a powerful preventative intervention. So I've got about 6 things here where are the that are measurably reduced in breastfed infants. And again, number 1 was NEC, necrotizing enterocolitis. It affects about 7% of preterm babies, but it has a mortality of up to 50%. And breastfeeding reduced NEC incidence by up to 62% in preterm cohorts. Respiratory infections was number 2. Breastfeeding reduces infant respiratory illness by up to 72%. And the aluminum salts may exacerbate airway inflammation that you get from canned formula, while breast milk delivers secretory IgA, and immune modulating oligosaccharides. Some formulas try to stick in a few oligosaccharides. They're powerful sugars. But the important thing is the aluminum. There's aluminum salts present in canned formula. So with NEC and respiratory infections and otitis media, ear infections, a big drop off by as much as 50% of sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. Now, SIDS is often associated with very early vaccines, but it's also heavily associated with non-breastfed babies. Then there's the incidence of type 1 and type 2 diabetes reduced by as much as 30%. Childhood obesity in children that were breastfed is reduced by as much as 25%. Childhood leukemia up to 20%. Asthma and allergies anywhere from 30 to 40% reduction. So breastfeeding delivers these protective nutrients and antibodies and microbiome modulating factors, but it's what it avoids. It avoids industrial additives like aluminum salts. And the powdered and the liquid formulas often contain aluminum at levels regulated only for intravenous infant products, not formula infants, especially preterm. And these preterm babies often lack enough mature kidney function to get the aluminum out of the urine. And so it effectively increases the risk of inflammation in the gut, in the pancreas, in the respiratory epithelium, which is the lining, the mucosal lining. So given this volume of evidence, why is breastfeeding in the hospital in a mother about to give birth still treated as an option? In some places, even controversial. And the reasons, of course, are structural. Formula companies fund pediatric organizations. How much money does the American Pediatric Association get from formula companies? Hospitals will send parents home with formula samples. Insurance rarely reimburses for lactation consultants. In other words, you want a nurse, but you're having a hard time getting going. Maybe you're not producing enough milk. Maybe you're not producing milk. There's herbal remedies for that. Maybe you're not producing enough. There's herbal remedies for that. Maybe the baby isn't latching on. There's consulting therapy for that. And the U.S. maternity leave policy ranks dead last among the industrialized nations, making exclusive breastfeeding logistically impossible for minors. In Europe, some countries can have as much as a 6-month lactation stay-at-home pass from the federal government. Why would these countries not only insist on mama breastfeeding her baby, but given mama a get-out-of-work-free pass for up to 6 months to make sure she breastfeeds that baby before she goes back to work? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? Breastfed babies are far healthier than can-fed babies. And in countries, which is all of them, except our country, of Western nations, that provides health care for their citizens, wants as healthy a citizen as they can come up with. And they know it starts with breastfeeding. So breastfeeding isn't just natural. It's the only immunologically alive, active, metabolically responsive, neurologically precise infant nutrition system known to science. And it's also the only one made by the same genetic structure that made the body. Not some whiz kid chemist in some Nestle back office place playing around with different formulas. Now, I'm not about guilting parents. I'm trying to eliminate the system barriers that's making breastfeeding harder than it should be. Parents deserve support. Whenever a mother comes in with her newborn for me to look at the baby, 9 times out of 10, the baby's being breastfed. And I can't congratulate the mother enough. And I talk to the infant, and I tell him, listen, buddy, your mother is giving you a start that's going to make you light years ahead of your peer group that didn't get breastfed. So make sure she appreciates you, appreciate her. And obviously, babies deserve what works best. There are so many animal studies. I've seen them myself from state colleges, agricultural colleges, that are always experimenting with different kinds of feed for commercial animals, different kinds of fertilizer for the farms that feed the commercial animals. And there were studies that have been done at more than one university of feeding pasteurized milk to a newborn calf. They didn't live 90 days. All right, I think I may have hit that one hard enough now, long enough. For sure. I've got some information I wanted to share with you on the brain, but it's kind of political. Maybe I should move on and not worry about that. Yeah, I think that might be better. It's kind of political. It's out of DARPA, actually, where the 5G stuff and now the 6G that's just starting to emerge, and the targeted 5G broadcast on the brain and what it can make somebody experience at a distance being targeted with 5G. But I kind of stopped saying stuff like this to my patients. There is hardly a teenager when they come into the office, either by themselves because they can drive or brought in by a parent, that isn't sitting there almost the entire time they're in the office with their head and neck bent all the way over like they're feeding out of a feed trough, staring into the glass of an iPhone or some other smartphone, and zipping through X or zipping through Instagram or zipping through whatever their favorite sites are, or adults playing games, solitaire or the Tetris type thing, while the other person that came with them is being taken care of. And I see this over and over again, and the 5G transmission that's driving these systems and the electromagnetic energy that's coming out of these things, when with some of these kids, their eyes can't be 12 feet away or 12 inches away from the screen, sometimes much closer than that. And I used to say something. I just don't anymore, unless I'm asked. I don't know if I'm getting snooty, if I'm getting arrogant, or if I just don't care. I mean, this is a crazy confession to be making from a healthcare professional. But I do care. I care a lot. I care about their health. I care about the health of my patients, especially the children, especially this 12-year-old girl that I started the show off with. 2 years old, falls down cement steps and bangs up her face pretty bad. And interestingly enough, when I was she was brought in by her mother. And because she's a soccer player and a volleyball player, but every time she starts running and jumping around, she's in terrible pain. Her neck hurts, her back hurts, her low back hurts, her legs hurt, her knees hurt. She's only 12. And I thought at first, oh, this is going to be a scoliosis patient. But no, she doesn't have scoliosis. And as I'm taking x-rays and analyzing them so I know what side of the body is the problem and what I need to do to fix it, the mother says, you know, and she calls the patient by her first name. Remember when you fell down those cement stairs? And I'm sitting there analyzing the picture, and I turn around and I said, what? Oh, yeah, when she was 2 years old, she fell down cement stairs. Just bump, a bump, a bump, a bump to the bottom. Did she break anything? No. Did she go to the hospital? Yes. Nothing was broken. X-rays, CAT scans of the brain. No, she was just fine. They told us that everything is okay. Well, everything wasn't okay. She was knocked way out of alignment. And so at 12 years old, and now she's 5, I swear she's got to be 5'7". At 12, probably at least 125 pounds. Very thin. And so while I'm talking to her, trying to explain what's going on, you can see her shoulders are rounded, pulled forward, her head's way out in front of her chest. She's leaning over, even though she's not looking at her cell phone, she's leaning over like she is, or was looking at her cell phone. And the first thought that goes through my mind whenever I see a child like this is I wished I could have had my spine corrected at that age. The headaches that I got, the headaches that I suffered until I was in my late 30s, till I came under this care. In 4 months, I'll be 75. I used to have horrible headaches, 1 or 2 a week, until my first upper cervical correction in the fall of 1991, 34 years ago. I can't believe ever having one more headache in the last 34 years. So she's got pain all along her spine, headache pain. She looks like there's something. She's only coming in on one engine, not very alert, not conversant. So I get some x-rays. And there it is, just as big as the sun in the sky. Her neck is leaning way off to the right. Her head is tipped way off to the right. And the top bone is twisted forward on the right side. And using a mathematical formula based on the analysis of that x-ray, I know how to fix it. And so I had her lay down on the table. I told her, as I tell every new patient, what I do is so gentle, you're going to wonder if I'm even doing anything. You'll feel my hand very lightly on your neck behind your ear. You're going to hear some little clicks. But you're not going to feel anything until you stand up. So I work on it for several minutes till I feel like what I do is I wait. When I can feel the back muscles relax with what I'm doing, then I know I pretty well got it. So she stands up, and it's like some light turned on her face. She's bright. Her eyes open up. She's got this smile on her face and this half skeptical, half shocked, half surprised, half relieved. Of course, there's a lot of halves in there, isn't there? Appearance. I said, I want you to walk over there to the front door of the office and walk back to me and tell me what you feel. Well, she's standing up straight. Her shoulders are back. Her head is back over her shoulders now. And her shoulders leveled off, her hips leveled off. And she's standing there I said, sweetie, what do you feel? And she has a hard time describing what she's feeling. And I said, yeah, it's the first time you ever felt this. You're having a hard time finding the words. And she kind of nodded. I said, do you feel taller? She says, yeah. I said, you are. You're anywhere from 1 inch to 1.5 inches taller than when you walked in here. You didn't grow. Your spine just straightened up. We just unlatched, loosened the jam up that was in your neck that was holding you down. like something pushing down on your head, suppressing you. How's your back feel? Oh, it feels a lot better. How's your low back feel? Well, it hurts. Does it hurt as bad? No, it doesn't hurt nearly as bad. I said, well, it's inflamed. You've had muscle contraction down there for most of your life. But I just stopped it. What I'm doing is like bringing you in out of the burning sun. You're sunburned, but you're away from the sun now. So we're going to give it a few hours to a few days for the sunburn essentially to heal, or in other words, the inflammation that you're feeling to heal. I will see her for her first follow-up Friday. But based on what her post-X-ray looked like, because it was straight up and down, the neck was vertical, the head was vertical, and for the most part, the twist had been reduced down to zero. When I can do that with a patient on their first visit, they usually don't have to spend much time or money seeing me. And so she walked out a completely different person than she walked in. And she's only 12. And now she can have a life. Then on the other end of the spectrum, a lady I started yesterday, 86. She's been through it. I mean, every possible accident, injury, fall, spill you could go through, she's experienced at least one of them. Completely locked up, twisted. One shoulder terribly lower than the other one. Her, you could see the high hip on the opposite side of the low shoulder. Very typical. And she came in as a referral from the friend of a mother of a patient, 2 times removed. It wasn't even the patient that she spoke to. It was the friend of the patient's mother that is a friend of this lady. And she said, well, it made sense to me what they said. So I examined her, and yeah, she had a leg pulled up a full inch short. She's only about 5'3", 5'4". One leg was a full inch short. And I said, well, I'm going to even these legs for you. When I'm done with you, they'll be even. Your hip, because your hip is going to relax. That's what causes the short leg phenomena anyway. It's not your leg isn't short. There's just contraction of muscles in the low back that elevate the hip, that make it look like it's short. Now, if you had polio, or you had some kind of major bone defect or birth defect, or something that caused the completion or the incomplete formation of the leg, yeah, then you could have an anatomically short leg. Some people do, but it's very rare. Anybody else that has a short leg, simply the top bone in their neck is out of place. What's the relationship? When the top bone in the neck comes out of place, muscles are imbalanced in the back as far as tone is concerned. One side is tighter than the other side, and it elevates that hip on that side. So when you lay on your back, it makes the leg look like it's shorter. That, to me, tells you you're misaligned, and I'm going to work on you. But I need x-rays, because I haven't sliced idea what to do for you without film. Because what I'm looking for, you can't feel. You can only see it on an x-ray. The side of the misalignment is revealed. The headpiece position that I have to put your head in, where I stand, how I touch, what I do is all based on what that x-ray tells me. And then I work on you. And then with this 12-year-old girl, I took her back into x-ray to make sure that I got it and there wasn't something left. And her head and neck were perfectly straight, leaning way off in right field to begin with. Now they're perfectly vertical. And her body showed it. Her hips leveled, her shoulder leveled, her hips untwisted, her knee untwisted, because she was having knee pain. That's the nature of the work that I do. And it's just, since March of '95, I have seen over 22,000 people. And it started with K-Talk on the Kay Henry Show. The first Monday of March, 1995. She had come in Well, I called her up. I had just arrived from finishing up a kind of a residency that I was doing in Tulsa with one of the gods of the work that I do. And being a long time listener to K-Talk Radio when I lived in Utah earlier. I mean, I was listening to K-Talk back in the days of Bob Salter. Talk about a talk show host. And I knew that when I got out here, I had to tell my message. I had to tell the story of what happens when the top bone in the neck comes out of its proper position with the skull. You see, that top bone isn't tied down with the disc. The top bone, the atlas, the C1 up here, is not glued to C2. Like C2 is glued to C3 with a disc and all the way down to the sacrum. So the rest of the spine all moves as a unit. They don't move independent. They're all stuck together with discs. They all move like a snake. They all move together as a unit. But the top bone moves separately and can move out of its juxtaposition, its normal position with the base of the skull and the top of the second bone. And it pulls on the spinal cord. The spinal cord doesn't like to be pulled on. You could end up with migraines, headache patterns, neck pain, jaw pain, facial pain, hearing problems, balance problems, vertigo. I've seen a lot of vertigo lately. It can cause shoulder problems, inability of the shoulders to relax, where you can't put your hand over your head, even to the point of a frozen shoulder. Can cause breathing problems with the intercostal muscles of the chest, the muscles between, in and around the ribs. So you have a very tight chest or a tight back or tight shoulders. It can cause problems with the heart, usually in the sense of sympathetic override, tachycardia, high blood pressure. We did a high blood pressure, a pilot study with Dr. George Bacris, who is known as Dr. Hypertension in the medical world, published over 700 papers on hypertension. He was the one that directed this study of 15 patients with type 2 hypertension, meaning their hypertension, they could not get it below 165, and they were on 2 different hypertensive drugs. Of these 15 people, every single one of them dropped at least 15 points systolic pressure after the upper cervical correction. Bacris saw this and he went crazy. Called for a large study, and they wanted to get money out of the NIH to do a large study as to how the malposition of the atlas at the top of the neck can cause high blood pressure. You know how much money the NIH was willing to give up for a medically controlled study using chiropractic as the means? Yeah, not a penny. Not a penny would they give for that study. And so it can cause gastric problems, overproduction of acid, underproduction of acid. Can cause gallbladder problems because all these things are stimulated by the nervous system. And the nervous system is the thing that's compromised by that misalignment at the top of the neck and subsequent subluxations along the spine. All the way down to affecting infertility. We stopped counting at 200, the number of ladies we were able to help conceive, who had tried for years, just could not conceive. Their hormones were correct. All their parts were present. There was no limiting factor. There was plenty healthy sperm motility, healthy sperm count. Nothing odd about the would-be mother's ovulatory cycles. She just couldn't conceive. And so the nervous system is intimately involved in conception. Once that limiting factor was removed, they conceived. And like I said, we stopped counting over 200, and that was probably 10 years ago. We stopped counting. So that's the power of the work that we do in the clinic. But it also affects the articulation of the hips, the articulation of the knees. Knee surgery is the most canceled surgery in the clinic. And so this 12-year-old girl was complaining of knee pain yesterday. because her body's leaning way off in right field. So she has abnormal stress on the knee. You take x-rays of the knee, and the knee looks fine. And yet she's got significant knee pain, but it was gone when she left. I didn't mean to go on this long. It's just, I never cease to be amazed at the kinds of things that we see in the clinic. And this lady that flew in from New Orleans, just massive back pain. But she is familiar with Utah, 72 years old, just a lovely lady, except she's all twisted up. But she got her first correction. I'll do her first follow-up this Friday, see how she's doing. But she left feeling considerably better than she walked in. And which is why this is so powerful for scoliosis. It's so powerful for sciatica, sports injuries, tendonitis, tight muscles, not the least of which, low back pain. And a young girl of 13 I'm taking care of for seizures. As long as she holds her correction, she doesn't have any seizures. A 23-year-old lady doesn't have any seizures as long as she holds her correction. I see her about once every 6 to 8 weeks for a checkup. When she loses her correction, she has a seizure. All right. So, because I got started at K-Talk, I was talking to my staff here a couple of weeks ago, and I said, I want to cut the initial fee in half for K-Talk listeners because they got me going. That first time with Kay Henry, she was suffering terribly with asthma and allergies. She carried around, like a lot of people do, their little albuterol canister, their little gas jet that they use during the day when they can't breathe. And so I had just, as I was telling the story, I had just arrived from Tulsa. And I called up K-Talk, and she answered the phone. She was the morning host. Some of you listening now remember Kay Henry. And I had nothing to lose. I just said who I am. I'm from Tulsa. I used to live in Utah. I'm back. I'm establishing a practice in Salt Lake City of a specialized approach to the spine. And I understand you have asthma and some rather severe allergic reactions at times. And I said, I'll make you a deal. And like I said, I had nothing to lose. I'll take that away if you'll give me an hour on your radio show. There wasn't 2 seconds that went by. She says, deal. If you can get rid of this, I'll give you an hour on the show. And an hour on her show then, 31 years ago, was $350 an hour to advertise your goods. And so, and some of you know the story. A lot of you, I'm sure, don't, or new listeners, because I haven't told the story in a long time. It's one of my favorite stories because this was like a Thursday or a Friday. And so I said, this coming Monday, after you do your show, I want you to come to this address, was where I had an office set up, temporary office. And I said, I'm going to work on you. And then Thursday, the following Thursday, and this was her option, she said, on the 3 days later on Thursday, you come in and we'll talk about it. So she came to the office on that Monday morning, and I worked on her. I took x-rays on a machine that probably wasn't even aligned. And I got a good idea of what was wrong. It was a common misalignment. And I worked on her based on that misalignment. And then I was supposed to go out to the K-Talk studio Thursday morning by 9 a.m. for her show. And she was going to report as to what happened. I did not talk to her at all before I showed up out there. You know, they're on 33rd South and 9th West, out beyond the freeway, out in some big old grassy, empty field. And it was wintertime, so it was all brown with some snow here and there, and there's a double wide trailer, and that was the K-Talk studio. So I go out there and I walk in. There's only one car in the parking lot. I mean, even Starley wasn't there, the owner of the station. And I walked in the studio, and there's nobody. There's a reception desk, nobody there. I looked in a couple of rooms, nobody there, and I realized the broadcast room was behind me after I'd walked in, and Kay Henry was there on the microphone. And there's a little monitor up on the wall there in the main room, and she said, "He has come. Ladies and gentlemen," and she's a Jewish lady. She says, "John the Baptist has come to Salt Lake City. You're not going to believe my story in the next hour." And I'm kind of looking around like, I thought I was going to be on next. And so it goes to break, top of the hour news break. She waves me in the studio, and I go in and I sit down. My stomach is up in my throat, scared to death I'm going to sound like a fool, and shaking in the knees. And she says, "You ever been on radio?" "No." "Well, then sit down here. Let me show you what to do." So she gives me the basic instructions and gives me headphones and a microphone in front of me. And there's the bank of telephones. And I had called up my friends ahead of time. And I told them at 10 minutes after the hour, you call in and you say, "What is NUCA?" You call in at 20 minutes after the hour. How does it work? You call in at 30 minutes after the hour. What kind of conditions can it help? You call in at 40 minutes after the hour and talk about what you can do to make sure that the correction lasts. And you call in at 50 minutes after the hour, and just whatever question that hasn't been asked, you ask at that time. Well, as I'm sitting down at the table there, getting ready for the show to start, every line is already lit up. There were 4 call-in lines. All 4 of them were already lit up before the show started. And so the break's over, the news finishes, the station ID, and then she says, "Ladies and gentlemen, he has come. John the Baptist has come to Salt Lake City. 3 days ago, Dr. Stockwell worked on me in his clinic. And you know that for decades now, I've had problems with breathing." And she mentions the captain, which was her husband, and a captain in the services, the armed services, and how he had been involved with her problems and suffering. And she said, "This morning when I walked out of my apartment to come to the radio station, I could smell the western desert blowing in the wind for the first time in 30 years. Well, no one's more shocked than I am." And she says, "Dr. Stockwell, welcome to Salt Lake City." And I'm kind of going, ha, 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 ha. I thanked her for letting me on the show. I just probably did a very poor example trying to explain what had happened. And then she took a phone call. And the first person, Rhonda Lee. Many of you remember the name Rhonda Lee. I think, if I remember, I was the first caller. And she talked about Kay. "Yeah, I know your problem, and I know how long you've had this, and it's wonderful, and Dr. Stockwell this, and Dr. Stockwell." And I am gone. I'm just floating out there somewhere beyond Pluto over what just happened. None of my friends could ever get a call into the station. The phones were locked up the entire time with people calling questions. And I remembered, "Give out your phone number, dummy, give out your phone number." And so I gave out my phone number, and my wife, who was at the office, was taking phone calls. We only had one line. Only one line, and people talked about it being busy later on. But over the next, I would say the next 2 to 3 weeks, there were at least 30 new appointments. Well, by the time the show came to an end, I was hooked on talk radio as a participant, not just as a caller or a listener. I mean, I had, like I said, I was listening to talk radio in the days of Bob Salter. And so it's just, that's how it began. That's the beginning of the story. And following that day was a roller coaster ride from then on. And she, at the end of the show, said, "Can you come back next month?" Yeah, I can come back next month. So I was on April, and I was on May. And then in June, a Saturday morning spot opened up on K-Talk. And so I had a regular show from June of '95, that's 30 years ago, on K-Talk thereafter. And then that fall, two of my childhood friends that I grew up with, Tom Drashel and Dick Perry, bought the station from Starley. And then it was around March of the next year. The Morning Talent had a problem with Dick. Not that it's not hard to have a problem with Dick. And I was going to say something, but I think only Dick would appreciate it. Anyway, I love Dick. He's like a brother. I mean, we grew up together, and anyway, he calls me up Friday afternoon after he has problems with the talent that morning, and he says, "Can you talk about something other than health?" Well, yeah, probably. Well, you have the morning show Monday through Friday, starting Monday. Get ready for it. And that was it. And then it took off like a rocket from there. So because the initial patients coming from K-Talk built the practice, I have this special through the rest of the month of July. Half off for a new patient. You would call 801-523-1890 and schedule an appointment. It's about a half an hour consultation. Now, you're scheduled for a 2-hour period. The first half hour is at no cost. And if you decide that this isn't what you're looking for, this isn't what you want, we'll shake hands and you go your way and I'll go mine. And no charge at that point. There's no charge unless you want me to take care of you. So like this 86-year-old lady yesterday, I asked her, I said, "What do you understand I do here?" "I don't." "You don't know what I do here?" "No, I don't." "You ever been to a chiropractor?" "Nope." "Well, how'd you get here?" "Well, the friend of a friend told me, I mentioned this earlier, kind of a thing." So after a half an hour of examining her and explaining what I do, she said, "Yeah, I want you to take care of me." So that's it. I had all these other things I wanted to talk about. Sometimes I just get stuck on this incredible story that was made possible because of my listening audience. And many of them are like family. Many of them, I ended up taking care of their families and their families' families. And even to this day, I'll take care of a new mother bringing in her baby who was a baby when I first met her, when I first took care of her. She was a baby. I guess that's where all these years came from. So we're coming here towards the end of this morning's program. As you noticed, I'm only doing 1 hour on Mondays and Tuesdays. I've got to get some stuff going with the stream, more so than before. And but don't give up on me with my political stuff. I know I've offended a lot of people because of some of the viewpoints that I've recently taken. But I still think, as I look back over the years, K-Talk is a part of my life every bit as much as my children and all the friends that I've come to know. And that's one of the reasons why I'm still here. I've had offers elsewhere, but I'm here at K-Talk. So the phone number again, 801-523-1890. If I don't think I can help you, and there are some whose problems are outside my scope of practice, but I can usually refer them, send them somewhere else I feel good about. And but again, it all comes down to personal responsibility. And as I was talking about earlier, this 1 in 3 teens, age 12 to 17, 1 in 3 in America now are pre-diabetic. And the amount of propaganda and programming that they're just almost being force-fed, those are the ones I'm the most concerned about now. When you look at the decreasing fertility rates and the decreasing choices for good foods, from breakfast to dinner. Anytime a mother, I took care of another brand new patient yesterday, a mother of 4, who just ran circles around me in her understanding of herbology and natural substances. I just sat there and listened to her. I was fascinated with what she knew. I didn't know this stuff. And she makes sure her 4 children are fed an optimum diet. And she said, I was listening to you when my dad was glued to you 20-some years ago in the mornings, and I was still going to school. And that's the effect you've had on me and on my children because of your devotion to this concept of eating better to feel better. I think we're going to come to the end here really quick. I'm just watching the screen. I'm sorry for the variance in volume of the program today. That's beyond my control. Those of you who are on the stream, apparently you're getting a pretty good signal there. But we're going to come up to the top of the hour news. I will be back again Monday at 8 a.m. with the events of the day. And I'm just, I'm trying to report the events without bias one way or the other, although you can't open your mouth without some bias coming out. But it's been a great journey of 30 years now, almost half my life involved with K-Talk, and proud to be one of many of the hosts at K-Talk now, to be a part of the host family. So I'm going to bring the phone number at the office again one more time, 801-523-1890. I'm going to bring the stream to an end. I hope you appreciated the story as much as I appreciated living it. But I'm going to end the stream, and I will see my streamers, if not over the weekend, certainly by